Hello, and thanks to everyone who's been following my blog. I'm sorry I haven't put anything up for quite a little while, but thanks for persevering. Now I want to talk to you today in order to try and persuade some of you to vote for the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn. And I'm doing this because of the real threat the Conservatives pose to the NHS. Margaret Thatcher, when she came to power nearly 30 years ago, wanted to dismantle the NHS as well as the rest of the welfare state, and she was very plain on this. She was stopped by two things. First of all, there was a massive rebellion in her own cabinet because they realised it would lose the Tories the election, and also because Patrick Jenkins, her private secretary, went to America and found out how dreadful the American private insurance system is. But this didn't stop her. She still wanted to increase the amount of private healthcare provision in this country. She wanted a quarter of the British population to have private health insurance. So she carried on promoting this. Also, I remember how the Tories manufactured a dispute later on in the 1980s or early 1990s, which resulted in dentists leaving the NHS. Now there still are NHS dentists, but you may have difficulty finding one, and dental charges now can be extremely high, so that many people now aren't going to the dentist. And this carried on into John Major's government when Peter Lilly introduced the Private Finance Initiative. This is where private enterprise builds and manages hospitals in partnership with the NHS. In actual fact, it's a way of getting the costs of building a hospital or any other kind of health centre. It's a way of manipulating the statistics so that they don't appear so much on public records. As it stands, those hospitals and other healthcare centres that are built under the Private Finance Initiative are much more expensive than when they're built under the old NHS, and they actually have fewer beds. If you want to have to go into this further, you can have a look at Captive State by George Monbiot, who goes into the statistics and shows this. Now, this policy was taken over by the Labour Party under Tony Blair, who wanted to make it more or less universal throughout the NHS. Blair, like the Tories and Peter Lilly, had been contacted by private healthcare firms like the American insurance company Unum. They wanted him to increase the participation of insurance companies within the NHS. Now, Alan Milburn, one of Blair's health secretary at one time, wanted to turn the NHS into nothing but a kite mark for a series of services provided by private healthcare providers. So, Blair passed a series of legislation splitting up the NHS and putting in funding into in the hands of community care groups. Now, this was touted as giving a choice to individual doctors. Individual doctors don't have the time or the energy to act as administrators. So these community care groups tend to be dominated by a few individuals. They were also deliberately set up with the intention that they could finance themselves through private funding and contract in private services. At the same time, the healthcare centres, the polyclinics or the clinics Blair wanted to set up, he wanted to have them set up using private funds. Again, private funds and run by private healthcare companies like Bupa, like Circle Health, like Virgin Healthcare, Branson's. And the Tories, when they came to power in 2010, despite all their verbiage of saying that they would defend the National Health Service, have done nothing to reverse this. In fact, they have increased it. Andrew Lansley David Cameron's Health Minister, or Secretary of State for Health, in 2012 passed a piece of legislation which removes the Secretary of State for Health from having to provide state health care. Basically, it's one step towards the privatisation of the NHS. As I speak now, more and more services are being contracted out to private industry for the NHS. Also, the NHS is also the Tories passed legislation in the NHS which allows these healthcare companies to charge the NHS for basic services, which may include the ambulance. There is a real danger that we shall see the NHS privatised under the Conservatives, and I also see no opposition to this policy from the Liberal Democrats. There is, however, opposition from Jeremy Corbyn. He has promised to renationalise the NHS. Also, Dr. David Owen. David Owen put forward a motion calling for the NHS to be renationalised. I know he's the leader of the former SDP, but I think he was very, very good in this and needs our support. If you want further information about this, then there are several books available, such as NHS SOS by Jacky and Raymond Tallis, both of whom are medical doctors. It's published by Oneworld in 2015. I've written a book, Privatisation, Killing the NHS, and that's available on Lulu. And there is a Dr. El-Gingihy, El-Gingihy, who has also written a book, How to Privatise the NHS in 10 Easy Steps, which is available from Zed Books. Now, private health care means more expense. It means there are 50 million people in America who cannot afford health insurance. 33,000 people die in America every year because they do not have health care. Now, the private health companies are also less, not more, less economic than state medicine because they spend so much more on administration. They have to advertise. They also have extensive legal teams. They also have to raise their money for the shareholders. And it was also somewhat like this before the NHS came round. If you want, well, there were under the old system there were charity hospitals, which again spent much of their time trying to raise funds, writing letters. And again, as in the old NHS, as in the old system before the NHS rather, many people did not have health cover. They weren't covered from the state insurance system, and so they suffered. They suffered because without the NHS they could not afford their health care. This is what it will go back to, and this is why I think we have to vote for the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn to renationalise the NHS. Thank you.